Hello, I'm Basil Valentine, and this is Unprecedented TV, unfiltered, uncensored, unprecedented, the home of free speech here on the internet. Do please like and subscribe over at YouTube. Follow us on X, and remember, I'm on air every day, Monday to Friday, 1 p.m. for Ascending Order, your daily news edit, with live guests and all the genuinely most important stories from around the world. Don't allow yourself to be propagandized by the corporate media. Forget the world at one on Radio 4. Join me, Basil Valentine, instead, 1 p.m. on X, Monday to Friday, also on YouTube. And I'll see you all very soon. In fact, I'll see you all right now. Welcome to Ascending Order with me, Basil Valentine. Welcome to another week on this extraordinary revolving globe we call planet Earth. What an exciting time to be alive, sometimes for the right reasons, sometimes, unfortunately, for the wrong reasons. In today's program, we're going to be taking a deep dive into events surrounding the so-called ceasefire in Gaza. Hope, of course, that it is a long-lasting peace, whether or not it brings justice and human rights and freedom and all the other things I stand for. Well, that remains to be seen, but at least the kinetic, mechanized massacres seem to be paused, at least for the time being, although as we are about to hear, they could resume at any time. But first, this is a subject that we'll be looking at on and off all week. Of course, the dreaded Keir Starmer is determined to push through his digital ID bill. When first announced, it was apparently needed in order to combat illegal immigration by boat across the channel. Well, it now seems that that has been ditched already, and they're owning up to the fact that it's simply to control the UK population. You're going to need it to access public services, to go to the doctor, possibly even to buy a pint in a pub or go to the supermarket. What I don't think Starmer has realized is the depth and breadth of the opposition to him and his nightmarish dystopian plan. He and the other arch globalists in the government are the only people in favor of it. In fact, opposition to digital ID unites a broad spectrum of the political class, from Richard Tice on the one hand, right the way through to Jeremy Corbyn, and you can't get bigger polar opposites than that, with, of course, Ed Davey of the Liberal Democrats, and just simply ordinary people who will not stand for it. 3 million have signed the petition. If you haven't done so, then please do so. And here's an indication from Birmingham at the weekend in a shopping centre of the kind of opposition that Starmer faces.
Starmer's a wanker. Hey! Starmer's a wanker. It's Starmer's a wanker. Hey! Starmer's a wanker. Hey! Starmer's a wanker. What the bomb cloud of the night? Hey! Starmer's a wanker. Sing it down,
I don't think I've ever heard a British Prime Minister derided in such a derogatory way before. I mean, I think even Margaret Thatcher, who was uniquely unpopular in the early 90s, avoided being, avoided that kind of language. Put it that way, people aren't afraid to use that sort of language in public these days, whereas 20 or 30 years ago, they might have been. And I think there's every chance that you'll hear that cry ringing out loud and proud on the streets of London on Saturday, when, of course, a huge anti-digital ID march is taking place. I believe these are the details. Here we are. Resist digital ID. They fear the people most when we stand together. Mass non-compliance protest, Central London, 1 p.m. Saturday, the 18th of October. And it is my intention to be there myself. Now we must turn to the big international story of the day, which is, of course, the ceasefire in Gaza. At the half-hour mark, I'm going to be joined by Dr.Rehiana Ali, consultant neurologist who has found herself in the crosshairs of the Israel lobby for opposing genocide. Messages coming out of Washington and the White House are very mixed. This morning we had the bizarre spectacle of Trump at the Knesset sitting next to Netanyahu, all sort of cheering away for him. Really rather bizarre stuff. Mertz, of course, well, we know what his position is. We'll come on to that in a moment. The final touches they put to the destruction of Gaza. Here we are, Rachel Shabby. The long ovation for Trump in the Israeli Knesset right now. The cheers and name checks for a roll call of US genocide enablers from Israel's genocide enacting parliamentarians is so grotesque, such a dystopian inversion of truth or justice. Yes, I mentioned truth and justice earlier. You know, just because there's a ceasefire doesn't mean that Netanyahu suddenly is not a war criminal, or for that matter, Trump. A whole lot of them are. And this is like seeing Hitler and Mussolini cheering at the end of the Second World War. Had they won, it doesn't necessarily make them the goodies. Far from it. I said mixed messages are coming out of Trump. They certainly are. Hamas is still the only organizational force, shall we say, in Gaza with any meaningful number of weapons, and eviscerated as the strip has been. We'll have a look at some images of that in a moment. Somebody needs to restore order, and it seems Donald Trump is willing to let Hamas rearm in order to do so. He was speaking aboard Air Force One on his way over to Israel.
Of Hamas rearming, instituting themselves as a Palestinian police force, shooting rivals. What is your message to Hamas?
They are standing because they do want to stop the problems, and they've been open about it, and we gave them approval for a period of time. You have to understand, they've lost probably 60,000 people. That's a lot of retribution. They've lost 60,000 people, and the ones that are living right now were, in many cases, very young when this all started. And we are having them watch that there's not going to be big crime or some of the problems that you have when you have areas like this that have been literally demolished. You know, you have 2 million people, and probably it'll be less than that, but you have close to 2 million people going back to buildings that have been demolished. And a lot of bad things can happen. So we want it to be safe. I think it's going to be fine.
Mr. President,
Who knows for sure, Katie? But I think it's going to be fine.
Mr. President.
A lot of buildings have indeed been demolished. What have they been demolished by? Who demolished them, Donald? It seems as though the US administration might be on a collision course with the Israeli government. Indeed, the world is on a collision course with Israel, because they're determined to continue the genocide. Hasn't been enough suffering yet as far as they're concerned. This is Israel Katz, the defense minister, saying today that he's willing to restart the killing if they don't get what they want.
Israeli officials are openly saying they plan to resume attacks on Gaza. Israel's top officials are openly declaring that they intend to terminate the Gaza ceasefire after they get their hostages back. Defense Minister Israel Katz has posted a tweet in Hebrew which machine translates as follows: Israel's great challenge after the phase of returning the hostages will be the destruction of all of Hamas's terror tunnels in Gaza, directly by the IDF and through the international mechanism to be established under the leadership and supervision of the United States. This is the primary significance of implementing the agreed-upon principle of demilitarizing Gaza and neutralizing Hamas of its weapons. I have instructed the IDF to prepare for carrying out the mission." End quote. Now, Hamas has not agreed to any demilitarization or destruction of its tunnels. There is no way to demilitarize Gaza and neutralize Hamas of its weapons against their will without continued warfare, something Israel has demonstrated it cannot do without killing shocking numbers of civilians. Katz's comments echo the public statements of Prime Minister Netanyahu, who said in a televised speech on Friday that Hamas will be disarmed and Gaza will be demilitarized, and that if Hamas doesn't disarm voluntarily, then, quote, "it will be achieved the hard way." In another statement, Netanyahu said, "We have achieved tremendous victories, but the campaign is not over. Part of our enemies are trying to recover," end quote. Israeli outlet Ynet reports that Israel is planning to resume its blockade and prevent reconstruction if all the bodies of the deceased captives are not returned, when Israel already knows that Hamas probably won't be able to locate all the bodies of deceased Israeli captives due to the intensity of the Israeli bombing campaign over the last 2 years. Ynet reports, quote, "If Hamas does not cooperate with the return process and Israel suspects that it is deliberately hiding the bodies in order to preserve them as a bargaining chip, it is expected to impose a series of sanctions on it, including preventing the reconstruction of the Strip, the entry of caravans, the opening of bakeries, and the entry of civilian equipment," end quote.
The sadism just goes on and on and on, and I believe that no medical supplies have entered Gaza yet since the so-called ceasefire. Mads Gilbert is a Norwegian surgeon who's visited Gaza many times. He made this quote, "This is evil on a historic scale. I have no words." What was he talking about? Well, he's talking about this report from Al Jazeera.
I've been walking for the past 45 minutes, and I'm telling you, every meter that I walked through, I could see the sign of life that was here, the charred signboard of a pharmacy, the bicycle that was tangling from the rubble. This is the closest area to the agreed upon withdrawal line of the Israeli military. In the background, you see that area where Palestinians displaced from their own homes are unable to get to that part of the eastern part of Gaza City. We are right on Al Jala Road, one of Gaza's main lifeline, the busy street that used to be filled with many of the shops, the apartment blocks, and the residential clusters full of life has just turned into a vast field of rubble. As you can see, all of these buildings have been newly destroyed by the Israeli military in the past few weeks. The use of explosive armed vehicles, the airstrikes, the drone attacks, the bulldozer that were aggressively operating in this area, leaving many people, as you can see in the background, are searching through the rubble and through the debris for whatever they are able to salvage of what they left when they were forced out of their homes. This is not just about destruction. This is dismantling civilian life as a whole for Palestinians. Hani Mahmoud, Al Jazeera, from the heart of Gaza City, Palestine.
Don't miss out. Get the full picture. Subscribe to Al Jazeera for reliable news, expert insight. Like, share, stay ahead.
Just before they left, the Israeli troops put what they called the finishing touches to their destruction of Gaza, torching food, homes, and a critical sewage treatment plan as soon as the ceasefire was announced. An orgy of destruction. Faces blacked out there, but we hope they can be identified. Those soldiers could be returning to a Western country, to the United States Australia, or even the United Kingdom. Do you really want that kind of person amongst us? Well, you haven't got any choice. And if you don't like it, remember, you're an anti-Semite. But that isn't the worst of it, by no means. What has come about in the last couple of days is the revelation that as Palestinian children return to the rubble of their homes, they are finding that toys and canned food have been left behind by the Israelis. But it turns out the canned food and the toys are in fact booby traps. Yes, it sounds incredible, but that is indeed the case. Here is a picture of some of them. IDF.
I can't say I'm surprised because we all know how evil Israel is and there's literally no freaking limit to how evil they are. But tell me why, as the civil defense is cleaning through the rubble in Gaza, they're finding baby toys and canned food that are actually booby traps and explosives. So like obviously a child is going to be intrigued by a toy and walk towards it and grab it, or a parent that is just desperate to make their child happy is going to go want to grab that toy, and then the toy is a freaking booby trap and it's an explosive and it's going to kill them. Or they use the fact that they've been starving the people in Gaza for months, that obviously they're going to also walk towards a can of food thinking, hey, now there's food for my family to eat, and it's a freaking explosive that's going to kill them. Like this whole spiel that you're defending yourselves against what? A child that wants to play with a toy, or a person that you've starved for months that just wants to eat? Like, they are so freaking evil.
Indeed they are. There's really no other way of describing it. But of course, remember, if you seek the destruction of the organization, the so-called IDF, Israeli Defense Forces, then that's totally unacceptable. Here's Andrew Pierce on Sky.
Some of those marchers are chanting death to the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force. What they say, they want to kill more innocent Jewish men who are conscripted into the Israeli army. Is that that's what they were calling for in these marches? What a shocking, outrageous, disgusting thing to say, especially in the days after what happened in Manchester at that synagogue.
Yeah, the IDF is an organization. It's an army, as far as I know. It isn't an individual. So if you say death to the IDF, it's like saying death to the Waffen SS. It means you seek the end of that organization as a military force. And I think in the light of what we've just heard there, that indeed is a noble aspiration, is it not? I could go on playing excerpts about the appalling destruction of Gaza all afternoon, but I'm going to leave it to this musical creation. I warn you, you need a strong stomach for this, but when Andrew Pierce comes up with that kind of garbage, then perhaps he needs to watch this from Double Down News.
If the world live streams genocide, change it. If the world live streams genocide.
I see dead people surrounded by death. A father picks up pieces of his own son's flesh. A young girl, gut spilled out, gasped her last breath. I see politicians see this as success. I see a burnt child clinging to his dad's arm. White phosphorus, flashbacks, Vietnam. Imagine thinking protesters are bad when there's a son lying next to his decapitated dad. Limb amputation, zero anesthesia. Imagine being a child under that procedure. Imagine being starved and just getting weaker. Imagine digging for your kids in the rubble beneath you. Imagine being cold, laughed at and called a creature. Racial supremacy, fascism's key feature. Forget about history, it's not the best teacher if you invoke the Holocaust with willful amnesia. I see mass graves, hands tied behind their back. I see human bodies, squash bones totally flat. I see hand all alone coming under attack. If I must die, bring hope, they killed Rafah and shut down Jazeera. They couldn't make it clearer, they don't want you nearer. The truth for a mirror, reflecting, connecting, everything affecting. Every Zionist talking point is a confession. Crying to the camera, someone shouted in the father whilst the crying little boy hugs his dead father. Crocodile tears, God forsaken, for every sleeping child that will never awaken. This is for the children that can't stop shaking, for the invisible trauma that will pass on generations. The body keeps the score, but they don't count the bodies, but contest your bodies and lobby with lobby. Check all the flight logs. Who are the Donnies? Who's got the copies to blackmail their colleagues? Who's on the payroll? Who's in the black book? Who's the careerist? Who's just that shook? Senators redirecting money from the people to provide weapons for a genocide is evil. Joe Biden gleeful, Uncle Sam lethal. Intimidate the ICC to drop the legal. Document properly every atrocity. Laugh and make a mockery of smashing up a property. Psychopathic honestly, systematic policy. Indulge the colony and prop up its economy. Western civilization bombs raining down. Attack your own people to defend the foreign line. Cancel culture, free speech, legislate, suppress. The free world is not free, it's something to address. A young boy rests his hand on the head of his brother who is dead from the dropping of the lead. Pressure of the concrete popped out his tongue. Dead forever young. Imagine that's your son. Imagine you're a mum with nowhere to run. They killed all your children, every last one. Imagine you're a dad, unable to protect, unable to console, unable to defend. Resistance, defiance, industrial violence, testing ground for clients, the very worst in science. Cowards alliance, celebrity silence. From Gaza to the Met Gala, selfish compliance. Imagine hell on earth on a daily basis. Bombs rain down with smiley faces. Modern day fascism, superior races. Live on TikTok, streamed by racists. If the world live streams genocide, change it. If the world live streams genocide, change it. If the world live streams genocide, change it. Little girl live dreams when outside, plane hit.
And my thanks to Double Down News for that extraordinarily powerful little video. Of course, thousands and thousands of children have been orphaned over the last couple of years, and they're largely invisible to us in the West. But here's a particularly poignant story of one girl who not only lost both her parents, but was also blinded in one of the thousands of Israeli air raids.
العيشة صعبة من دون الأم والأب، وخصوصا لما تفقديهم يعني نظرك في نفس الدقيقة. أنا أختي سنة طلبات، ما ظلش يعني غيرها إلا من ريحة أهلي. هديت يعني أنا لما بدي أعمل الشغلة هي اللي بتساعدني، هي اللي بدي. كنا قاعدين في بيت خالي، صار إجا واحد صار يحكي لنا اسمه المنطقة بدهم يضربوا برج النوم وبرج العمل. إحنا خلينا الحارة. إجا واحد تاني صار يحكي للناس ارجعوا اقعدوا جوا البيوت. إحنا رجعنا وبقى لسه في ناس ضايلة في الشوارع. في الشارع مجرد ما خشينا البيت في ثواني كان صار الانفجار. استشهد أمي وأبوي وأخوي وخالتي وخالي وخالي وعمتي وابنها. طلعنا النجيات وحدات أنا وأختي. أنا عندي عيني الشمال فقدتها كانت فيها شظايا، وعيني اليمين فيها أمل بس في الخارج، وعندي شظية على القلب وعندي حروق. وأختي عندها شظية في الجمجمة وكسر في رجل بلاتين في رجلها اليمين ورقعة في رجل الشمال. أنا أول ما صحيت من الإصابة صرت أصرخ بدي أهلي، بدي أشيل الشاش، بدي أشيل يعني أتحرك. صاروا يعني عماتي مصطفية يثبتون المكان عشان الدكاترة يعدون، وأنا أصرخ بدي أمي بدي بابا بدي ماما، أصرخ وصيح. بعديها يعني أخذوني على العيون، صرت أحكي مع مامتي بدي أشوف ماما بدي أشوف ماما. لما أخذوني على العيون حكيت لها بدي ماما هلقيت أنا ليه، حكيت لها ماما راحت على الجنة. ستي يعني هي بتعيننا وأختي بتعيني، فبقدرش يعني أوصفلك. رسالتي للعالم إنه النساء لو طلعت مرة أتعالج العين
And of course, what's the answer to this? Send in Tony Blair. Well, it seems that doesn't go down very well with the British people. Hopefully, he's going to be sidelined. Here are some vox pops from Saturday's demonstration about the Blair creature, Blair, as he has become known.
What role do you think Tony Blair should have in the future of Gaza?
None. Palestinian people should be in charge of what happens in Palestine.
Tony Blair, Iraq, I was there when I marched. 1 million people marched. No. Only people who are involved should be Palestinian.
I have a role for Tony Blair. There's a river, the Thames, over there. I think he should jump in it.
I think Tony Blair should take the fastest plane to The Hague and not to Palestine. He already ruined Iraq. That's enough for one person for a lifetime.
And that man should never be anywhere near the ceasefire that's been agreed or anything to do with Palestine.
Oh my word. Tony Blair should be in The Hague. I have no idea why that guy is still wandering around, free as a bird.
He should be buried somewhere up to his neck in sand, somewhere well away from there. It's a colonial response. Any future planning for Gaza has got to involve the Palestinians. And I don't just mean the PLO. I mean, it's got to involve Gazans, and they deserve self-determination. It's shocking.
I think he's known as the butcher of Baghdad, isn't he? You know, anything to do with the Middle East, that man should not be involved.
Palestine will only be free when the Palestinian people are at the forefront of deciding their future, and war criminals like Tony Blair should be nowhere near the decision making in Palestine or in Gaza.
Of course, we're in an era of particularly acute uncertainty with regard to the future of Gaza. The whispers in Tel Aviv are that they intend to reoccupy, to expel as many Palestinians as possible. That's always been the agenda, particularly of the likes of Ben Gvir and Smotrich. The genocide has slowed down for a day or two, but the Israelis always find a way to kill Palestinians pretty much every day of the year. One American politician who's woken up to the fact, who is not the private property of AIPAC, is Marjorie Taylor Greene. She is effectively the reform wing of the Republican Party in the United States, dyed-in-the-wool MAGA, Make America Great Again, but it seems she actually has a heart and recognizes Palestinians as human beings.
At the same time, the relentless bombing of the Palestinian people, and many of them have been just innocent people. They're not Hamas. They're literally women and children, and you can't unsee the amount of pictures and videos of children that have been blown to pieces and are they're finding them dead in the rubble. Those aren't actors. That isn't fake war propaganda. It's very real, and I think that is equally horrific. I want to see an end to it, and I think most Americans do. I'm very grateful that he is ending the war and doing everything he can to end the war.
And he should be given credit for that.
100%. Oh my gosh, he genuinely
100%
for Israel and Gaza. Okay, release the hostages all day long, but for the love of God, these people in Gaza have been brutally murdered, and it's over the top. And the IDF is still unbelievably controlling and brutal to people at checkpoints. It's not just Muslims. It's also Christians that live there. It's everybody. And I'm really thankful that he's worked hard on that. But what are we doing? We're buying out and doing a buyout with Argentina? Like, huh? $20 billion?
$20 billion.
Bailing them out?
Then he just did a concert. I don't know if you saw the president of Argentina was singing.
Yeah, Milei, of course, an arch Zionist. Apparently his name's Milikovsky, same surname as Netanyahu. Just a coincidence that nothing to worry about. Of course, Marjorie Taylor Greene is in a tiny minority in Congress, in as much as she is not owned wholly by the American Israel Political Action Committee, also known as AIPAC, which bribes politicians of all hues to stand resolutely behind Israel. Now, they've been getting a bit of bad PR recently. The American public are starting to notice how their government has been completely hijacked by a foreign power. So AIPAC are, of course, doubling down and trying to present the genocide state as somehow being inextricably intertwined with the United States. This is their latest propaganda push.
Talk about AIPAC.
Today, AIPAC.
On Capitol Hill, AIPAC.
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 You may have heard our name, but how much do you really know about AIPAC? AIPAC is an American organization that works to strengthen the U.S.-Israel relationship. This partnership advances America's interests and democratic values and helps keep Israel safe. Our 5 million members are U.S. citizens, Democrats and Republicans from every part of the country who urge our elected leaders to enact pro-Israel policies. This includes expanding America's defense partnership with Israel, supporting life-saving security assistance, confronting Iran and its terror proxies, and promoting peace and normalization. Being pro-Israel is good policy, and AIPAC members make sure it's good politics, too. We raise money to help elect pro-Israel candidates for Congress from both parties. And we take the political fight to our opponents, helping defeat anti-Israel candidates running for the House or Senate. AIPAC is leading the fight in Washington to secure the future of the U.S.-Israel relationship. The actions of pro-Israel Americans today will help determine the future of this bond and the fate of both countries.
Isn't it wonderful? There's AIPAC's that's a recent scene in Gaza, people starving, trying to get a bag of flour. Now, joining me now on the line is Dr. Rehiana Ali. Welcome to the program, Dr. Ali. Fortunately, we don't have an equivalent of AIPAC here in the United Kingdom, but we do have all sorts of other Israel lobby groups, and it seems that you've been very much in their crosshairs yourself.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Good. Yeah, so I remain in their crosshairs, but I think that's probably the more minor story. I think this is, just the attack by the lobbies, trying to shut down, critique in every sphere of life, whether it's professional, particularly in the professional life. So, solicitors, doctors, anyone who's going to be speaking out about Palestine, then you have to hit them hard. And the reason you have to hit them hard is not because that individual is particularly important, but it's because you have to teach them a lesson. So it serves as a lesson for everyone else. Is to make sure the rest of the population, get the message loud and clear. Mess with the lobby, and they'll try and wreck your livelihood. But I think they won't win. They can't win because it is a numbers game, but there's a lot of fear.
Exactly. I mean, I have total moral clarity on the subject, and could sit here all afternoon playing clips of just how evil is the only word the IOF have been in their destruction of Gaza. Here's some soldiers putting what they called the finishing touches to the destruction of Gaza. The glee with which they indulge themselves in destroying property is illustrated by this soldier who thinks it's very funny that they've destroyed all the schools.
לכל מי ששאל למה אין לימודים בעזה,
אופס, נפל לנו טיל עליכם, איזה באסה, יו, חבל. ככה לא תהיו מהנדסים יותר.
And here is Khan Yunis, now that people have started returning to it. It's just a pile of rubble.
يا هالدمار ولا بيت ولا بيت يا اخوان ولا بيت يا اخوان زي ما انتم شايفين يا اخوان كيف حجم الدمار في مدينة خان يونس بعد انسحاب الجيش الاحتلالي.
Not a single building left standing. Now, if you're fine with that or you support it, then you're okay in the eyes of the British establishment. But if you think that is a horrific war crime and want to call it out on social media, then you have to be demonized, prosecuted, delisted. As you say, every effort is made to completely destroy your life. This is not just morally perverse. This is totally inverted, Rehiana.
It is completely, totally inverted. I think that, even after the Hiroshima bombs, there were buildings left standing. So actually, when you look at what's been dropped in Gaza, and actually there's much smaller territory, I think people don't maybe can. I think it's, even for me, it's hard to imagine like the vast scale. When you see pictures like that, you still don't appreciate this whole of Gaza and how small it is and how densely populated it would have been. So this idea, and that's probably why I always have this issue with the figures being quoted, because they destroyed the hospitals. Every single 36 hospitals, every single hospital was attacked, and they obviously made sure that there was no documentation. This is not something that's accidental. It's very deliberate to make sure that there could be no counting, because most of the bodies, I keep saying, most of the bodies will never reach the hospital, and I've seen picture after picture of bones, skeletons, basically, of skulls or body parts. So the vast majority of people, are not going to be buried. They're going to be under rubble, and eventually you'll find bits of bone. And I think it's the fact that is what's so horrific. That I think the cost on a human scale, and the fact that this doesn't seem to bother people. That once upon a time they said never again. Allegedly, and what it really meant was never again, supposedly for Jews, not if you're non-Jewish.
Yeah, here's one destroyed building paid for by the USA, it says. Now, you're a physician, I'm not, but it surprised me to discover that a human body, a corpse, turns into a skeleton in a matter of a couple of months. It doesn't take very long at all for all the flesh to decompose, and thereafter for the bones themselves to start decomposing. Rather unpleasant subject, this, but the simple fact of the matter is that people that were murdered 18 months ago, a year ago, in buildings that have since demolished on top of them, it becomes very difficult to distinguish human remains from concrete rubble, and I don't think anybody has the time, resources to sift through all this rubble in an attempt to identify what are human remains and what is simply destroyed building materials. So we'll never know how many people have been murdered.
Well, not quite. I mean, you're right. I'm not actually a forensic pathologist. I actually have probably some personal experience, and it's incredibly painful experience. My brother was killed in March 2022, and initially the postmortem wasn't done. And when his postmortem was done in May, that was 2 months later, the body was obviously partially composed. So I know from personal experience that, particularly in hot climates, the body will decompose pretty fast. And so I know that from personal experience. Therefore, for me, I guess, what's happening in Gaza resonates quite closely because, there isn't a dignity in Gaza. And that's precisely what I experienced, obviously, in Pakistan, in 2022. But, apart from that personal experience, I guess I would say that, yes, they destroyed the health ministry. But, there will be a very easy way of counting, because you will have live Palestinians. And we know what the population was before. We know the population was around about 2.2 million. So you can count them from the live Palestinians. There will be some form of census, and the missing number will be the death toll. And I think, Trump himself gave it away to some extent when he talked not so long ago, a few months ago, that there were 1.5 million Palestinians left. He said, I want to move, 1.5 million Palestinians. Why did he have that figure? So sometimes the truth slips out, and I think there will be a count. Yes, of course, I don't think it can be counted by bodies or corpses, but I think it can be counted from the live bodies.
Latest academic estimate is that 680,000 have been killed, of whom 350,000 are children under the age of 5. These are real sort of Holocaust numbers. But remember, as James cleverly says, if you carry on protesting about this, there's something wrong with you. Let's hear what this pathetic Tory MP had to say.
I cannot understand the motivation for protests of this type so regularly. The tone has become increasingly distasteful. The timing has been distasteful. We're seeing superficially pro-Palestinian protests mutate into clearly anti-Jewish protests.
Well, they're not anti-Jewish protests. The last slide also said Jewish bloc for Palestine. I mean, again, what a totally morally bankrupt individual Cleverly is. The protests have to continue until there is justice, Rehiana, until the likes of Cleverly, Starmer, and the rest are in The Hague. It's the fight of our lives, and it's not going to stop anytime soon.
No, I think, there has to be, as you say, justice. There's different ways of, and that justice, first of all, means that, yes, there's rebuilding, but I think accountability for what's happened to the Palestinians. I think, and many of those individuals will not be able to pursue justice themselves because entire family lines have been wiped out. So sometimes family members were like over 100, and there is no one to seek justice for them. And I think we owe it. And I think I feel quite strongly about this point for the very simple reason that we allowed it to happen. And I often say this, and I think, what do I mean by that? Well, I mean that we were too afraid to tackle the lobbies in our countries. The reason these politicians did not face a fear was because each time that people spoke out, you were accused of anti-Semitism, or anti-Jewish hatred, more correctly, which is total nonsense. So the shielding of the largely Jewish perpetrators occurred, and people were terrified to call them out. Politicians were supporting them, supporting Israel, and I disagree with all this nonsense about British imperialism and American imperialism. I mean, you talked earlier about AIPAC. AIPAC now trying to change the topic a little bit by saying, we're an American organization. It's not an American organization. It's never been registered. It's a foreign organization. And it has, 5 million members, it claims. Well, as I kind of put out on my Twitter account, well, that's 5 million sign-in. These are people working for a foreign entity, and they should be registered as foreign agents, quite frankly, in America. And the same occurs in this country, that we have lobby groups and we have payments to individuals, whether it's Starmer, whether it's Wes Streeting, who's now attacking healthcare workers. And the rest of us could have held these people to account, and we didn't, because number one, the movement is weak. The movement thinks that somehow if you elect Labour politicians, they would behave themselves. They've been worse than the Tories in some respects. And secondly, people can't speak up, won't speak up, because most of us are wage slaves. When your livelihood is threatened, you don't speak. And I think this goes to the heart of the matter, that this country, I say repeatedly, and many other countries, it's occupied. And how does one deal with that? I think, first of all, you have to recognize the occupation. And I know that firsthand, not just from what's happened over Palestine, but I know that, when I stood for the elections last year, there was a lot of, that's really when the pressure on me intensified. And the fact that I refused to be quiet faced the consequences of that. And the consequences were the unlawful suspension. And I think we didn't really mention it on the last time I was on. But I now have a judge, a High Court judge refusing to give me a judgment for a case that was heard on the 10th of July. And again, I think that's pretty much unprecedented. I've been debanked practically by Santander for, again, no obvious reason. I've been smeared, but that's neither here nor there. And I would also say that the more latest thing was that because I recognize the occupation, there isn't a party that particularly addresses this one particular point. And I was in the process of setting up a political party. I don't think your party is going to be the solution. I don't think the various reform, reclaim, advance, none of them will deal with the occupation. And what's happened? Well, normally registration with Companies House takes a couple of days, and it's taken 3 weeks, and they won't explain their objection, if you like, to the name of the party. It's a perfectly, as you can probably imagine, it's a perfectly legal name, but we're at 3 weeks, and we can't get approval for a name, and that's Companies House. And the CEO of Companies House is Louise Smith, and no explanation is forthcoming.
We certainly need a campaigning organization that points out, as you put it, the Zionist occupation of so many aspects of public life in Britain, so much so that Wes Streeting has decided he wants to try and change the law or intervene in the workings of the General Medical Council and other bodies that license and regulate the medical profession in Britain. This, again, is effectively interference by a foreign state using Streeting as their puppet.
Yes, and so you have a situation where when I had my suspension revoked, so I was suspended obviously in December, and the General Medical Council, I was suspended in my absence, that's important to mention, and I could not get that suspension. They would have no conversation with me, and I took the General Medical Council to court. That was the hearing on the 10th of July. And again, there were delays because my indemnity body, again, it's another Zionist occupied organization, and it was a waste of time, but it was the cheapest option because I'd already paid for that subscription. And then when I did get my suspension revoked on the 14th of July, that was the first time, kind of hell broke loose. There was lots of coverage, as you recall, that Wes Streeting said this was outrageous and he would have to think about changing the law because this was the cheapest thing to do and it wouldn't cost him any money. And then obviously Dr. Rahme Al-Adwan, they pursued her for an IOT on the 25th of September. She didn't get any conditions put on her license. And again, there was massive amounts of coverage in the UK press. I would call it UK Jewish press. Article after article, both on her, linked to me, and basically saying that she should have been suspended. This was an outrage. What's important to point out is the GMC went. They have, since 2012, there's a separate body set up, what they call the Medical Practitioners Tribunal Service. And the MPTS was set up in 2012 specifically, so there was a separate body to the body that was investigating doctors. And there are a panel of 3 people. In her case, there were 3 different backgrounds, and they all heard the evidence from the GMC, heard the evidence from her lawyers and herself, and decided that no conditions were needed whilst she's being investigated. So this is not over for her. There's an ongoing investigation, which in my view, she should not be under investigation. I should not be under investigation because what we haven't committed a crime. We've actually spoken, and it's a free speech. But they are pursuing this, and West Streeting has come out and it seems quite serious about overturning the decision. So she's actually been taken to a second IOT. It's almost like it's a double jeopardy. She's being tried again for the same thing, and it's at this point, this shouldn't be allowed, and it's really putting into question: have they got the panel set up now? Have they found the right people to make a decision that the Jewish lobby will be happy with? Because I've kind of got tired of calling it pro-Israeli lobby. You could say that yes, the pro-Israeli lobby, but it is. They are Jewish, and they're advocating for a Jewish state. This has nothing to do with anti-Jewish hatred, and so this is what we're facing. That actually we're getting our MPs, parliamentarians, weaponized against British citizens.
Right, and indeed the racist nature of Israeli society was something pointed out by Holocaust survivor Stephen Kapos. Here's a particularly revealing clip.
I was visiting relatives in Israel. I was very shocked in what I found in Israel then. That was pre-67 war, an all prevailing sense of racism, really, and militarism combined. And I found that almost all members of my family, some of whom returned from Auschwitz, one particular cousin, and an aunt who was very heroically part of this rescue operation in Budapest and did very brave things. Nonetheless, they all became racists against what they called Arabs. They didn't say Palestinians, they Arabs. And it shocked me completely and turned me against Israel, basically, and Zionism.
I venture to suggest, Rehiana, that you and Rame are victims of that same racism. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, but we're not the. So first of all, there's definitely a discriminatory element. I mean, there's no doubt more brown-faced doctors or healthcare workers have been taken to task, but that's not the complete story. Ellen Creasels, who is the consultant pediatrician in Whittington, Whittington has a large Jewish population, that it serves a large Jewish population, had something in the region of like 2,000 patient complaints from the general public around Whittington about her because she was carrying a placard and her tweets. Her tweets are perfectly legal. There's nothing anti-Jewish in them. And but the fact that she got 2,000 complaints and she's white shows you that how coordinated this campaign is from Jewish individuals and Jewish organizations in the UK. And I think that it's us, it's the non-Jewish population actually who need to be defended. It's not the Jews who need to worry about facing attacks, and they're not the ones being suspended and losing their licenses and facing death threats and hate mail, etc. It seems to be the non-Jews. So I think people should be more concerned about us, and I think most of us now, have got to the point. Many of us have got to the point where we actually had enough of this chutzpah, because that's what it is. Constantly, Jewish patients don't feel safe. Why? Well, because I'm anti-genocide. And I think that, at some point we'll lose his patience with that line. There's no reason, there's never been any cause for any Jewish patient to worry about my care, because it's not a question I ask. Are you Jewish? When you come to my clinic consultation and I've treated you for 20 odd years, what does it matter? Why do I care? I don't care what background you are, what faith you are, what orientation you are. I never ask those questions. And it's getting very tiresome. And that's why, on Wednesday, this week, there's going to be a protest outside Parliament, organised by the health workers against censorship. And the reason for that protest is very simple. West Streeting is effectively a foreign agent. We know that he's probably taken the region of 70,000. That's the least figure that we're aware of. and not to mention the hundreds of thousands from private healthcare companies. And this man is conflicted, and he should not be health secretary of a national health service that's meant to serve all of us, and needs to resign. And I think it's the first step of individual where an organization says, you know what, the problem with most of us is that we're too timid. And I think that we've had enough of West Streeting, we've had enough of the General Medical Council targeting us and acting at the behest of a foreign lobby, and it's time to take action against them. And I would kind of urge people to support us, because eventually they'll come for you. They've come for us at the moment, but they will come for you if you don't toe the line.
Yeah, it seems that opposition to genocide brings you into the crosshairs of, well, basically this government. I mean, the simple fact is that Starmer, Lammy, their predecessors, Rishi Sunak, James Cleverly, all these people need to go to The Hague to be tried for complicity in war crimes and genocide, the ultimate crime. We're in a very dark place because it's endlessly swept under the carpet, the scale, the magnitude, the depth of the horror and the suffering, and they try and distance themselves from it at every available opportunity, and instead attack people like yourself, so that all the oxygen in the room, all the energy has to go into defending yourselves, when really we should be counterattacking.
I completely agree with you, and I think this is one of the things that I think health workers against censorship is that and I think it's part of the purpose of the lobby. When they tie you down with defending your license, you're inevitably distracted. And I think this is where health workers against censorship and other groups need to do likewise. Like, we have the personal battle, and we also have a more general battle, because when we talk about taking these individuals to The Hague, it can only be done, in my view, if one is uninhibited by the smear that you're anti-Jewish. And I think the response really from most people has to be, like almost like water on a duck's back, because we know the truth. I know that I don't have an anti-Jewish bone in my body. I know that Ellen Crystal is anti-Jewish. And I think it's time to stop even uttering that phrase and saying, I'm not anti-Jewish. I think literally, they need to be treated in the same way they're treating us, quite frankly. And I think the problem is we're too decent, we're too compassionate, we're humane, and the lobby doesn't behave that way. And they need to be given a dose of their own medicine, to be quite frank. And that requires exposure, in my view. And the problem is most people are not willing to call out interested parties. I think it's time to call out links. When people start talking and they're pro-Israeli, Swallow Braverman, I think it's time to say, well, okay, her husband's Jewish. Is there a conflict of interest here? Because if most Jews in this country are Zionists and they support Israel despite being British, then I think it's fair game to actually say, well, okay, that's a conflict of interest. Because people would have no hesitation. If I was advocating, say, for Pakistan all the time, okay, I think nobody would have any hesitation to say, well, this woman has Pakistani heritage. Is that a conflict of interest? So why do we not do that for Jewish individuals? Why is there a different game being played? Because again, it comes back to that Jew taboo. Nobody wants to say, well, Swallow Braverman's husband is Jewish. Tugan Hat is, I think, part Jewish. Jenrick's wife is Jewish. Starmer's wife is Jewish. The judiciary, if you look at the makeup of the judiciary, there's a high percentage of Jews, they're overrepresented. Why can we not talk about these things? That doesn't mean that I'm saying that's a bad thing. I'm saying, well, actually, it's time that we noticed. So all this nonsense about
noticing, you see.
It's all the noticing, and why should we? And it doesn't make any sense. If there's all this overrepresentation by one group, then where's the rampant anti-Semitism? Because when there's rampant anti-Semitism, it's reflected in the representation, as it would be, say, for Black people, for example, where you say there's racism, but there's obviously many factors. People, the educational status, etc. All those things play a part. It's not going to be one issue like it's just racism. But Jews are overrepresented. They're a wealthy group. largely. And yet, if you say these things, then you get called by the likes of Greenstein, as I have done. Oh, Dr. Ali is associating with neo-Nazis. As if somehow he has a right to tell me what I can tweet, what I can say. That is actually Jewish supremacy from an anti-Zionist Jew. And I have, quite frankly, had enough of them. They shouldn't dictate what we can say.
The Free Speech Union claim to be the ultimate defenders in this country of our right to say whatever we like, but it's stuffed full of Zionists like Toby Young and Alison Pearson, and they seem to have an exception when it comes to people like yourself, or indeed myself. I'm due to go to a Free Speech Union meeting tomorrow night, and I'm going to be asking some very pointed questions because they don't really mean it, do they?
Well, I would be really interested in what happens after you ask your questions, because number one, they've remained very quiet. They have been approached. I had direct access. Now, he would claim that he did respond. He responded in a very dubious way, the legal counsel. The bottom line is we all have rules in our various regulatory bodies, but the issue here is different rules are being applied, and the Free Speech Union has zero interest when actually this is one of the biggest free speech issues around. So they will defend, for example, Quran burning, and say, oh, well, we don't want blasphemy laws. But, my question to Jenrick, and he's refused to answer it, was, okay, well, that's fine. You're entitled to your view. We live in a secular country. From me, that you have punishments for certain actions because it's a secular country. But would you agree that the Torah and the Talmud, you would have the same response? Because when it comes to, I hate using the term, when it comes to speech about Muslims, then there are no limits. And I'm okay with that. I believe in free speech. I think you should be able to say what you want as long as you don't incite hatred. But when it comes to even critiquing someone who's Jewish, then out come all these politicians saying, this is terrible, this is anti-Semitism. So, they won't answer that question. The Free Speech Union, will not be showing up, has not shown any support to the doctors and healthcare workers under attack for their free speech. I haven't committed an illegal act, nor has Dr. Rahme Al-Adwan, nor has Ellen Creasles. But the Free Speech Union is very, very quiet. And I think the last point I want to make about them is that I think they were set up specifically for this reason, so that you have this gatekeeping going on, that we have something called a Free Speech Union, but we're only going to defend certain speech, certain speech, and that's the gatekeeping. That's the limit of the free speech that you're allowed. Whereas the rest of us, will then face consequences because we won't have an organization to defend us.
Well said, Dr. Ali, and thank you so much for joining me today on Ascending Order here on Unprecedented TV.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
There she goes. Tomorrow, I hope I'm going to be joined by Dr. Frank Romano, one of the heroes of the recent humanitarian flotilla to Gaza. He's been deported. I believe he's now in France. I heard from him for the first time last night. I'm very glad he's safe and well. In the meantime, have a great day, everyone, and I'll see you all again tomorrow. Hello, I'm Basil Valentine, and this is Unprecedented TV, unfiltered, uncensored, unprecedented, the home of free speech here on the internet. Do please like and subscribe over at YouTube. Follow us on X, and remember, I'm on air every day, Monday to Friday, 1 p.m. for Ascending Order, your daily news edit, with live guests and all the genuinely most important stories from around the world. Don't allow yourself to be propagandized by the corporate media. Forget the world at one on Radio 4. Join me, Basil Valentine, instead, 1 p.m. on X, Monday to Friday, also on YouTube. And I'll see you all very soon.